Namaskar, everyone. Welcome to the Saraswati Sangam Project Eminent Lecture Series. We are absolutely honored to have Professor Alok Kumar as the eminent speaker today. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to share a little bit about the Saraswati Sangam Project. The Saraswati Sangam Project is a center of excellence that is dedicated to advancing and supporting research and dissemination of scientific inquiry grounded in Vedic knowledge. We have several threads of activities, a lot of which is original content. Please search for the Saraswati Sangam Project on YouTube to know more about our content. We also support the work of others, such as the Prachyam documentaries on Indian contribution and Anuj and Garvit's AKTK documentaries. We provide grassroots support to Gurukuls through fellowships for acharyas and scholarship for students, and we also have the Eminent Scholar Award. We are in the process of instituting an Hindu Science Young Scholars Program, and more recently, we instituted a writing competition and mentor program for young students to guide them in their educational and professional pursuits, which is aligned to the common shared roots of Indian heritage. Our eminent lecture scholar for today is Professor Alok Kumar. Professor Alok Kumar is a distinguished teaching professor of physics at the State University of New York at Oswego. He has been teaching in the American higher education for over 4 decades. Professor Kumar has authored 4 books, and about 130 articles are published in the popular media that discuss Kumar's scholarship. These media outlets include Reuters, the Press Trust of India, the Washington Post, Family Life, The Scientist, and others. He's also a fellow of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, Germany, a Fulbright specialist, and a NOVA NASA fellow. We are delighted to confer the Eminent Scholar Award to Professor Alok Kumar for his contribution to the advancement of ancient Vedic knowledge through the rigor of scientific inquiry to enhance the present-day awareness of the vast knowledge of heritage of India. The lecture topic for today is Ancient Hindu Science, its transition and impact on world culture. Welcome, Professor Kumar. We are delighted to have you here today, and we look forward to learning a lot on this topic from you.
Thank you much, Shrikanji. It's so nice of you to bestow this award to me. And let me share how I'm going to be spending the next 45 minutes on this topic. First, I'm going to share a little bit about the current status related to ancient Hindu science, what we know at the global level. And then I'm going to share our knowledge maybe 1,000 years ago. And then I will be talking a little bit about some specific contributions. And that's how I'm going to end my lecture. Now, the topic is so vast and it has so much information that if I continue non-stop for several weeks, still I will not be able to cover and justify. We are very fortunate that we are coming from a civilization where they have made tremendous contributions to science. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you an overview, and basically using a touch and go approach And whenever, I complete 45 minutes, I'll stop. And after that, I would be happy to answer your questions. As Shrikantji shared, I teach at SUNY Oswego. This is the, campus picture, and my office is in one of these buildings, and is about, I would say, 30 seconds from Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario is one of the Great Lakes, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And before that, I lived in, by the way, this is Haridwar, is the place where I grew up. And whatever I have achieved in my life, I attribute it to this city. That's where I became interested in the history of Hindu science and philosophy. As Shrikantji said, I have published 4 books, and the last book, I have published it in 3 different editions. So if you see on the left, this one, that's published from Switzerland, from Springer. If you know, Nature magazine and the Scientific American, both magazines are published by Springer. This blue cover, it was published from JACO, Mumbai in India. And then this one is published from California, so from America. So this book has been published in 3 different editions, and I'm very pleased with the response. The reviews are excellent, and I'll be sharing some of the contents of this book with you. Now, let me share first the GDP of India in different years. In terms of the world's GDP. So, for example, in year 1, when the Christian era started, Indian GDP was 32% of the whole world's GDP. That means close to 1/3 of GDP was based in India. That's, truly remarkable for a country where people constantly complain, oh, they did so much work in, philosophy and religion and in abstract thoughts. They did not produce much. Well, here is a example of that they did produce. And as the time progressed, and you can see, suddenly when the British period came, our GDP share kept on going down. At the time of independence, it became close to 2.0, almost insignificant in comparison to the world's GDP. And now it is again going up. And it is published by except for these 2 in pink, GDPs that I have listed, everything is, provided in this book, written by Angus Maddison, who is a, world famous economist, British economist. And he's dead now, but his book is considered to be an authority. Now, let me also share about India, that India has 2.4% of the world surface area, and it has 17.5% of the world population. So the current status is 2.4% area 17.5% world population. So obviously you can see that the population density is very high in India. Now, related to science, let's see what is the current status. So in year 2000, American Association for the Advancement of Science, that's the top organization that is, perhaps the largest. They publish a magazine called Science Magazine, and they decided, because it was the beginning of the second millennia, they decided that they are going to document the top 100 contributions in human history. 98% of the contributions, according to them, came from the Western world, and only 2 came from the non-Western world. And as you can see, both contributions, according to them, came from India. Invention of number 0 and the astronomical observations of the Hindus and Mayans. So they clumped the contributions of Hindus and Mayans together in one category. So now the issue is, if Hindus made such, by the way, the term Hindu is not chosen by me, it was chosen by them. So I just want viewers to know that. And when we take a astronomy course, introductory astronomy, then we know that we are not teaching Hindu astronomy in astronomy courses. Basically, that tells us that the knowledge that we are sharing in our curricula, that is somewhat incomplete. And for some, it is biased. So you can make your own decision on that. There is no mention of China, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. That's how, AAAS defined. Now, let me go back to about more than 1,000 years ago, and let's see what was the knowledge of Europe about India. Because as you know, Macaulay said that, the whole complete literature of India will not fill even one shelf, and that was his opinion recently. But let's see what was the knowledge of Europe 1,000 years ago. So there I'm going to share a Spanish scholar. His name was Saad al-Andalusi. Andalusi means Spain, that's another name for Spain. He was a Muslim. He was a Qadi. Qadi means, or Kaji in Hindi, in India. That means he was a judge. His role was to implement Sharia laws in civil matters. So he was a staunch, Muslim, and he wrote a book, Tabaqat al-Umam, where he tried to document the global history of science and ranked nations based on their contribution to science. By the way, this was, to my knowledge, the very first effort where somebody tried to compile a global history of science. Prior to that, mostly people wrote their opinion or about their region or their country, but nobody tried to write a global history of science. So this book is pretty precious because of that. So let's see what he says about India. And this is what he's saying. The first nation to have cultivated science is Hind. This is a powerful nation having a large population and a rich kingdom. Hind is known for the wisdom of its people. And over many centuries, all the kings of the past have recognized the ability of the Hindus in all branches of knowledge. So basically, he's saying that Hindus, they are associated with wisdom, and their contributions in all branches of knowledge is known globally. Now, after another thing that he wrote in his book, the Hindus, as known to all nations for many centuries, are the essence of wisdom, the source of fairness and objectivity. They are peoples of sublime pensiveness, universal apologues, and useful and rare inventions. Now, the issue is, why is he saying, crediting Hindus for useful and rare inventions? What are those inventions? And another thing is this universal apologues. Basically, it means is that the moral values or moral rules that Hindus have, they are the same whether they are dealing with Hindus or non-Hindus. Means when they are saying speak truth, then they are not saying that if you are a Hindu, you can lie once in a while and you will still go to heaven, but other people of other religions will not. No, there is no such. All their rules are universal in nature. So their moral values, they are universal in nature. For example, when they talk about the whole world, they say Vasudeva Kutumbakam, means the whole world is one family, or truth alone will succeed, not falsehood. They are not saying that, it depends on what religion you are from, or Sarve Bhavantu Sukhine, Sarve Santu Niramaya. So basically, when they are praying or when they are doing it for all, not only for Hindus. That's the beauty of Hindu religion. Now, as I mentioned, the question is, what kind of inventions have they done? People come up with new inventions only when the other tools are well established. So means Hindu traditions. So let's talk about a little bit about Hindu traditions. In Hindu tradition, you can ask any question. You can debate to resolve differences. And there is a tremendous respect for gurus and no conflict between science and religion. That's how it is. So let me elaborate these things. And because of the limitation of time, I will be touch and go, basically, rather than talking in detail. So Hindus do not emphasize faith. They emphasize rationality. That's the foundation of Hindu religion. So you can ask any question, just like Gita. That's a question and answer between Arjun and Krishna. There are Upanishads, like for example, Krishna Upanishads, or other Upanishads where whether you are a male or a female, you could ask any question that you felt relevant. And it was the role of the teacher to answer those to your satisfaction. So that's those who are involved in research, they know how important is this questioning, because this is how ideas evolve. Now, talking of Shastras, it's Shankaracharya is known for those Shastras. Gautama, he got married through debate. And so in India, there are examples after examples where issues were resolved based on debate, based on conversation, rather than killing those people. Because, the violence we see in today's world, if you follow these Hindu practices, it will disappear. Now, if you read Charak Samhita, there you learn the Robert's Rules of Order. Those who are administrators, they know how important is Robert's Rules of Orders, which were established only about 200 years ago, while Charak Samhita we are talking of in, thousands of years. So they have defined, and those rules defined in Charak Samhita, they are quite detailed. Because of the limitation of time, I cannot go through those. But the bottom line is, because we are trying to learn the truth, therefore there is no celebration for the victor and there is no insult to the loser. That's how the rules are. Talking of, respect of gurus, we celebrate a festival called Guru Purnima. That's the sign of a intellectual society where not the person who has sword or bomb or cannon, but the person who has knowledge is so well respected. It was an intellectual society, and these are the traditions. Now, talking about science and religion, we know there are so many confrontations in human history where people were imprisoned, they were killed. But in India, science and religion, they were never in conflict with each other. The progress in science has never been a hindrance to spiritual growth. In contrast, growth in science led to growth in religion, because, for Hindus, moksha is the ultimate goal. And for a Hindu, they could achieve moksha through the disciplines of astronomy, mathematics, chemistry, physics, yoga, medicine, fine arts, music, and so on. And because of that, science and fine arts, they were bound to prosper in India. And indeed, that's what happened. India did extremely well in science and technology. Like, for example, when Aryabhatta wrote his book, the title of his book is Aryabhatiya, that the first chapter, there are 10 verses. So that's the reason we are saying that this Das Gitika means 10 verses. So whosoever will know these 10 verses in the first chapter, which describes the movements of the earth, this is an important thing. Aryabhatta is saying that earth is moving. In 5th century, he was born in 476. If you can learn that, then you can achieve moksha. Kannada in Vaisheshika Sutra said, if you can learn physics, you can achieve moksha. So that was the mindset of the Hindus, that through fine arts, through music, through medicine, one could achieve moksha, which was the ultimate goal for all Hindus. Now, talking about now some of the contributions, as I have already mentioned, zero, that was Indian contribution. And let me share a little bit about zero. It was called Shunya in India. Shunya means nothing. When Arabs learned the concept of zero, they looked for a word that meant nothing in the Arabic language. And that word was sifr. Sifr means nothing in Arabic language. When Europeans learned it, they basically copied a word that was similar to cipher, and that's how it became cipher in Latin. In medieval Latin, they decided to spell it with Z and modified it a little bit. Then Italian, they called it zephyr. And from there, French decided to call it zero. And that's the history from shunya to zero. Now, just think about it. If we teach this knowledge in an elementary school, these kids will know that knowledge has migrated from one culture to another. You are globalizing these kids. You are humanizing these kids. And once you can humanize a child, all these word problems that we are seeing will disappear. Our education is failing us. I think we have to change and do something about it. Now, place value notation, that's another contribution of India. And there, for example, when we write 11, we write it as 1 and 1. The 1 on the left is not equal to 1. It is equal to 10. So that means the location of a number will define its magnitude. That's what place value notation is. In Roman or in Egyptian or in the Greek system, they were writing it as 10 and 1. And if you write as 10 and 1, you cannot perform mathematical operations easily. It's very difficult. Just think about, you are reading the stock market and you want to know, which has a higher value and which has lower value. All you have to do is how many digits do you have there? If there is a number with 3 digits, is going to be higher in magnitude than with the number with 2 digits, So this method, place value notation, it is very effective. And that is the reason it became a global standard. And someday, if you are interested, I would be happy to share with you the history, how Indian system became globally known. Decrees were issued against it. People were saying that if you are a patriot, you must not use these foreign system. And yet, eventually, it was a Pope Sylvester, who decided to write a book about it and made it known in the Western world. And the European Renaissance happened because of this mathematical revolution that came to Europe, and that caused, European Renaissance. Now, Al-Biruni, that's another name, very few people know in India. Let me share. If you know about the Islamic invasion, the very first person who came to India was Mahmud Ghazni or Mahmud Ghaznavi. The same person is called with two different names. When he invaded India, he brought a philosopher with him to document that history, and that person was Al-Biruni. So he wrote a book which is called Al-Biruni's India. And if you want to know the, about the Hindu culture, I would strongly recommend you to read this book. It's available in English. It's available, I think, on the internet, free, because it was written in 11th century. And it tells you how magnificent Hindu culture was. And by the way, since he was a Muslim with Mahmud Ghazni, he criticized Hindus for a variety of things. And those criticisms today, I'm sure if he were alive, he would have been embarrassed. So according to him, no nation goes beyond 1,000. That was the limit of counting. The Arabs too stopped with 1,000, which is certainly the most correct and natural thing to do. However, the Hindus, they go with very large number beyond thousands. By the way, in his book, he has defined, and that number is 10 to the 48. So that's a very, very large number. We are not talking about billions or trillions. We are talking about much, much larger, billions of billions, So Hindus defined these terms long ago. Now, same thing with the trigonometric function sine. It was called Jaya. When Arabs learned it, they called it Jeb or Jeb. Now, Jeb has a meaning in Arabic language. That means pocket, pocket in your trouser. And the Latin word for pocket is sinus. And that's the origin of term sine as we use. So every time we are saying sine theta, we are basically saying pocket theta. It doesn't make sense, but we have been doing it for about 300 years. That's the history of science, which again, if you pick up a trigonometry book, you are not going to learn about it. I'm going to share one example of astronomy, and then because my time is, almost ending, I will try to end my lecture. So, I hope you don't mind it. Aryabhata, he has written, as a man in a boat going forward sees stationary objects moving backward. Just so in Sri Lanka, a man sees stationary stars moving backward exactly toward the west. This is very clearly mentioned, just like when you are in a boat, in a river, and you are moving, you feel that the trees on the shore are moving backward. Just like that, because the earth is moving from west to east, the stars are moving from east to west. That's a beautiful, analogy he has used to explain that it is the earth that is moving and not the stars and not the sun. Why Sri Lanka? Because that's very closest to the equator. So, because if the moment you move away from the equator, then it will not be exactly toward the west. So, this knowledge, which is when we are talking about Aryabhatta, we are talking about 5th century. When Al-Biruni came and he found out about that, he criticized it in so many words. So means even after 500 years, rest of the world could not understand it. That was the situation. And for example, Al-Biruni writes, the follower of Aryabhatta maintain that the earth is moving and heaven resting. People have tried to refute it by saying if that were the case, stones and trees would fall from the earth. That's what. So the rest of the world could not, understand it. Now, the most interesting thing is the example I just shared with you, where Aryabhatta is saying, if you are going in a boat, then this will be your observation. When Copernicus wrote his book, he used the same example, that when you are sitting in a boat, you think the shore is moving backward. And now the issue is there a connection between Aryabhatta and Copernicus? By the way, if you know the life of Copernicus, he was not an astronomer. And yet his book on astronomy is a masterpiece. And there are indications that Aryabhatta's book was translated, and by the way, Copernicus knew Arabic quite well. So perhaps it can be, with some certainty, can be shared that perhaps, he knew, Aryabhatta's work a little bit. But again, it is very difficult to prove it. Now, talking about, this gravity, Aryabhatta wrote, again, just as the ball formed by Kadamba is this flower, right here. Kadamba flower is surrounded by all sides by blossom, just so the earth is surrounded by all sides by all creatures, terrestrial and aquatic. Basically saying there is no up or down in case of earth. Because of the gravitation, we are all, the same. And he was not the first one, by the way. In Vaisheshika Sutra, this is written in a very simple language, that the falling of water is due to gravity. So Indians, they knew the gravitational force, Newton's contribution is perhaps providing a mathematical form to that formula, but the concept of gravitation was known to the Hindus long before Newton. And by the way, if you know about Newton, his life, he was also a historian of science. He loved, learning about Egyptian and Middle Eastern and Indian, even Mayan history. So that aspect of Newton is not much publicized. Indians could produce, rust-free iron. And this is one example, the iron pillar of New Delhi. But this is just one thing that is popular. In India, there are many places like Indore, like Bangalore, like Orissa, where such kind of pillars are available. They are just outdoor, lying, for thousands of years and no rusting. And the key is the phosphorus. Indians knew how much phosphorus to mix, and from there they could figure it out. Now, I'm going to, just talk about one thing, and then I'm going to escape. When Alexander captured Porus and then gave back his life, and his kingdom, Porus was very thankful to Alexander and he gave him lots of gifts. One gift was 6,000 pounds of steel, because that's something Alexander could not have, because Indian steel was considered to be the very best. In fact, in Persia, the term for steel is Falad-e-Hind, basically saying steel coming from India. So this is how, and by the way, there are, plastic surgery, there is, yoga, Ayurveda. These are, there are so many, Hindus made so many contributions that it makes my life miserable, that how to compile everything in a single lecture, but that's how it is. So I'm going to conclude my lecture soon by sharing something, from Al-Biruni, the person who came to India with Mahmud Ghazni. He writes, unfortunately, the Hindus do not pay much attention to the historical order of things. They are very careless in relating the chronological succession of their kings. That's a weakness of India, and there is no question about it. Now, the issue is why. I have explained that why it has happened that Indians have not been very good. The reason is, when you are dealing with a civilization that is so long and where that tradition never faced much problem for thousands of years, why there is, there was no reason to define an event. And that's part of the reason why, Indians did not define history very well. That's the part of the reason we do not know who wrote Vedas. We do not know the authors of Vedas, because it's so long ago and knowledge is divine. You can, if with knowledge you can achieve moksha, means it's divine. And how can you labelize that knowledge by assigning a name of a person? So it was a practice there, Now, since we are dealing with science, another statement of Al-Biruni. The present time, however, are not of this kind. Basically, he's saying that science is disappearing from India. They are the very opposite, and therefore it is quite impossible that a new science or any new kind of research should arise in our days. What we have of sciences is nothing but the scanty remains of bygone better times. So he's admitting that science is disappearing from India. Now the question is why? Why is it disappearing from India? And he provided an answer to that too. Mahmud utterly ruined the prosperity of the country and performed their wonderful exploits, by which the Hindus became like atoms of dust, scattered in all directions, and like a tail of oil in the mouth of the people. Their scattered remain cherish, of course, the most inveterate aversion toward all Muslims. This is the reason, too, why Hindu sciences have retired far away from those parts of the country conquered by us, and have fled to places which our hands cannot yet reach, to Kashmir, Benares, and other places. So that's what happened. I mean, if you burn the libraries, how can you support these scholars? And that's what happened with India. there was a massacre of people, and it's a unfortunate, history of Hindustan. But things are changing. We are back. Where Google CEO, Microsoft CEO, IBM CEO, Adobe CEO, former PepsiCo CEO, MasterCard CEO, who perhaps will be the CEO of the World Bank very soon, and YouTube CEO. They are all people of Indian origin. With that, I'm going to stop. Thank you for your patient listening, and I would be delighted to answer any question that you may have.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. This really is a very fascinating topic, and I have a number of questions. Maybe I will start with a couple and then turn it over to others. So you spoke about the Damascus steel, and you mentioned that it was known as the best steel in the world at the time for its non-shattering property, one of them being. But after being manufactured for 11 centuries continuously, it stopped being manufactured completely in the 19th century. What led to that?
Oh, that's very easy to explain, In fact, why do we call it Damascus steel? The steel was, if you go to Damascus, they don't call it Damascus steel, they call it Hind steel, Muhannad. Muhannad is the word means coming from India. That's the term they use in Damascus. They are not saying it's that's our contribution. But we call it Damascus steel. Well, there was when British decided to colonize India, India's GDP was very high. They were, for example, in textile, we were number one. In manufacturing of artifacts from their metallurgical skills, we were a leader. So first thing what they did was, for example, I don't want to get into this negative thing, but I have to share because you have asked me a question. They cut the thumbs of all those weavers who were producing textile. That part of history, do we teach it anywhere? No. And they could not weave. Now, the people who talk about democracy and charity and kindness and so on, that's how they behaved at one time. So same thing happened in the production of artifacts. They decided that let's take the raw material to their land and produce it there and then sell it back to India. This is what happened. And so this is how all these, the production, of factories disappeared from India. By the way, just a few months ago, I decided that I'm going to find out, the first-hand account of, where a Britisher is admitting that they cut thumbs of, these weavers. And indeed, those accounts are there. So this is how it was. And so all industries in India disappeared.
Yeah, that's really, really sad. So, one other thing that we often talk about is these things and many of the things that are not taught in the school history textbooks. So that is one part of the story. I think the other challenge is parents, many parents today, you know, they prefer to put their children in the school that teaches them Western science or the history as the Western world has propagated it. The perception is if they put them in schools that talks about Indic civilization or about the Indian history, focuses on Indian history, it is not considered quality education, right? So you could teach all those things in the history textbooks. That's the supply side, but the demand side is how do you change the mindset of the people, because it also has to be a pull factor, right? So how do you change the mindset of these people?
Yeah, that's a a difficult challenge, but let me tell you how I deal with it. By the way, I have no such problem. By the way, I teach about the things that I am teaching or I have covered in this lecture today. I teach those things in my lectures, and I have no problem with my students who are trained in Western science and not about, India or China and so on. So what I talk about is that forget about what India did or what China did. Let's find out the truth. Who did what, So basically a truthful account of the history of science. I focus on that. And wherever that lead can take us, I'm fine with that. And I construct that meaning together with my students. So I'm not there as a preacher telling them what the truth is. I create that knowledge with their help. And because I create that knowledge with their help, they themselves find out that the history of science that they are learning is incomplete or in the mind of some bias. And I have no such problem, and in fact, I get excellent teaching evaluations, and that has led to my, distinguished teaching professor rank. So what you have to do is you have to produce massive literature where you are speaking, the truth. Most of the time, problem is people who are talking about it, they are not very scholarly and they brag about it. Bragging is basically, not helping at all. So you speak the truth and people, they appreciate knowing the truth. So that's how, I construct that meaning, that knowledge with their help. So it has been working beautifully for me. Unfortunately, because I teach physics, I don't get a chance to teach these kind of courses much.
Yeah, indeed. So at the beginning of the presentation, you had mentioned that rationality is the basic tenet of Hinduism and not faith. But if you look at the current times, do you think that is a little bit of weakness as well? Because increasingly we find people openly denouncing Hinduism and its beliefs on public platforms, and they take refuge under the garb that rationality is the basic premise of Hinduism. So do you think it is a weakness as in today's times as much as it is probably a strength?
Why do you call it is a weakness?
Because it gives people the liberty and the freedom to take refuge under that, to publicly criticize Hinduism.
Yeah. What you're saying is, it's a very slow system because people can slow down the information. But the other side of that is you are basically, not providing them any freedom to explore. And it's like democracy. Democracy is a very slow system because it's incorporating ideas of all different people, but it's the best that we have. Because dictatorship is not solution. So the same way here, it may be what you are saying is true that people can hide behind it, but in the long run, that's the best system, because eventually, if you cannot rationalize it, you cannot convince other people to follow you. And I think so, and you cannot come up with new ideas, new researches. So my feeling is, it may be a slow process, but perhaps it's the best process. Because your ideas are going to evolve once you face questions.
Yeah, yeah. And so how do you think the Hindu science, the ancient Hindu science, has impacted the world culture? When you look at the different countries and the different societies today, how has the contribution of Hindu science impacted it?
Okay. Let me provide a little bit long answer and share some of my personal things. When I decided to come to America, I was very young, in my early 20s. And I was the baby of my family, the youngest, and my parents did not want me to come here. So they said, you are not going to America, you are going to stay in India. But when I pushed them, and then when they realized that I'm determined to go, and because I wanted to see the world and I wanted to, be in places where, that are known for sciences, they gave up. But in return, my father asked me that, okay, you can leave, provided you promise me two things, that you are going to do something for the country and you are going to do something for the religion. So make these two promises and then you can go. So I promised him I will do it. And then that's how I decided to work on ancient Hindu science. This was just to fulfill my promise to him. The first thing I thought was, if India indeed was a great civilization, because that's what I was taught in India, that Bharat ka atit mahan hai, means India had a great past. If that's true, other civilizations must have written something about that. So I decided to go through the whole Greek literature, Egyptian literature, Middle Eastern literature, and European literature. And that's where I found out, my God, all these cultures are saying, admitting that Indians were the leaders in science and technology. But that information was never shared with us in India, the country, that produced that knowledge. So I decided to write a book about it. I have not mentioned, what was the impact on other culture. I gave you one example of the number system and Damascus steel. Now all over the world, we are using the same number system. We are using the same mathematics, and then we are using the, this metallurgical skills. And those metallurgical skills by the Damascus steel is not the only example. Like, for example, zinc distillation, that's a very difficult task because it melts at a very low temperature and then it gets oxidized. And therefore, the distillation of zinc is a very complicated matter, but Indians mastered it. They were the teachers. So when I realized that all these cultures are in glowing terms, I thought this knowledge must be shared with Indians. And that's where the first book that I have not even mentioned here in my lecture, it is based on this 11th century document which I shared, some quotations. So Europe wrote about India in glowing terms. Middle East wrote about India in glowing terms. Every single top, or most top natural philosopher of the Middle East wrote many times in the title of their books that this is the knowledge of India. Like Ziz el-Sindh Hind, that's the book on astronomy written by al-Khwarizmi. Sindh Hind basically saying this is the astronomy of India. Now, when I'm telling you al-Khwarizmi, you may think, I have never heard that name. I do not know anything about him. Maybe he was a big man or maybe he was not. Let me share something about him. He is the one who chose the term cipher for zero. His name, when it became popular in Europe, that al-Khwarizmi became algorithm, and from there became algorithm. So the term algorithm, it is his name in Latin. So that's the magnitude. The term algebra is used from the title of one of his books, Al-Jabar wa al-Muqabla. Al-Jabar became algebra. That's the magnitude of his impact on the world cultures. And he wrote 3 very popular books. In all 3 books, in the title, he's saying that's the knowledge of India. That's a story. Why can't we share it in India? We don't. Or for that matter, in the whole world, but we don't.
Yeah, you're very right. And I think part of it has to do with that we are always taught to self-doubt ourselves. We are taught to look down upon ourselves. We are taught to actually, our mindset, and much of it is probably colonial mindset, is, appreciate anything Western, but trash anything Indian. And this mindset has to change. I think the seeds of change have been sown. And I think work by people like you are so important, and we really are very thankful for the kind of work that you do to bring to the rest of Indians and the world awareness about the contribution of a great ancient past to the field of modern science. If there are any other questions, we'll take a couple.
I have a question. So I'm going to refer to your portion when you were mentioning that, there is, when you refer to the texts written by Copernicus, for example, and then you say that there were earlier texts written by, which are like derived from Indian texts, is there like some research you may have done on settling the chronology of Indian timeline? Because that's something that, there's I know it's an active field of research, and And that is where all these problems of, correct attribution come from, because most often people in the West claim that, oh, you don't have it written down at a certain point of time, so you only had it, you only talked about it, so it's not coming from you, it's coming from someone else. So how do you do that? And I was just wondering if you, there is like a lot of different definitions of yugas and those timelines present. And if you've come across, I came across a book called Yugantar, which basically, dissects how different yugas have different, lengths and how they impact the general timeline of Indian civilization.
It's an interesting question. By the just a few days ago, I gave a lecture in Washington, D.C. And this is a question, the question that you have asked me, it is basically asked in practically every single lecture I give.
Mhm.
Because this is the biggest weakness of the Hindu literature. The period that we are dealing with is so ancient
Mhm.
that it is not easy to define chronology. But it doesn't mean that we cannot do anything. First thing is, I'm going to tell you the problems. Why do we have problems? Number one, we are dealing with a very ancient period. There is a book, Forbidden Archaeology, by Michael Cremo.
Mhm.
It basically tells us that most of the chronology that we are giving is all wrong. Because if you do the carbon dating of ancient monuments, then the age that is coming out is quite different than what we normally teach. So according to him, and this guy his book is a bestseller, has sold millions of copies. According to him, these dates are going to be revised within our lifetime. And let me explain it to you why these will be revised. Not too long ago, Europe believed that the earth was created 4000 BC. That was the knowledge that was coming from the vice chancellor of Cambridge University, that earth was created in 4000 BC. But by the way, whatever I'm telling you, all this is provided in my book, so you can check it and
Right. But that
I,
knowledge comes from Bible, right? I mean, that's what Bible says.
That's right.
In the
That's
book
right.
of Genesis, that it was created
So
4,000 years ago.
yeah. So since that was their belief, when they assign a date for Vedas, totally in an arbitrary manner, Max Muller said is 1200 BC. That's it. And that's a date that got stuck with Vedas. What was the basis for that? He just basically said, there was no rationality there. So this is how things are done. So if you can raise questions, then all these things come out, and you will know the truth. Now, talking of another, since I have dealt by the way with this in an appendix in my book, I can talk a little bit more about it. When you are studying a culture, and that culture has a same pattern going on for a long time, the and knowledge is considered to be a divine, where you do not labelize knowledge. You do not define events either, and that's the problem. However, in Vedas, the position of stars are provided, and you can do back calculation and you can figure out when this happened. And when we do it, that age is coming out to be so old, it doesn't make sense to most historians. They do not want to change the history of science that we teach. And that's creating a big problem. So my answer to you is, trust me, this right now is in a flux because we are not, basically, we are not able to define it in a concrete way, but it will happen within our lifetime.
That is great to hear. But yeah, I mean, to your point about events, I mean, if you look at Hindu Panchang, our calendar system, we have, a way of, celebrating Kumbh Mela every 12 years based on the cycle of Jupiter, transits of Jupiter. And so, and that has been going on and on for thousands of years. I mean, like, what more proof do you need? I mean, I somehow feel that we are always on the back foot. We have to provide we have to cross a higher level of, evidence threshold as compared to, somebody coming from the West who has to just say, oh yeah, it was ancient Greeks and they're done with it. So that kind of is where I'm coming from.
Yes, yeah. What you're saying is true. And one example of that is the Sanskrit manuscripts that we have. Most of the manuscripts, I'm saying most, we have not even translated it as yet.
Right.
So just like today, when we talk about talk about politics, we talk about Chanakya. 250 years ago, we did not even know about Chanakya because his book was unearthed only recently, where Shyama Sastri decided to translate it. So today we know about Chanakya and we, claim about, we brag about Chanakya. The truth is, he was an unknown figure not too long ago. It's the translation of his Sanskrit manuscript into English that made him, gave him a global status. We have a large number of Sanskrit manuscripts just lying and decaying in books, in libraries. And we have to translate those and share with the whole world, what we have, the heritage we have. And once that is done, I think we are going to come up with a new history of science. Like, I'm going to give you one example, that has happened only recently. There is a manuscript in Needham Library in London. It's called Bakshali manuscript. And it was labeled that this manuscript was written in 9th or 10th century. It's a book on mathematics. So we basically decided that, okay, this was Indian knowledge in 10th century. Just 2 years ago, scientists decided that, okay, we have a manuscript. So let us find out what is the age of that paper. And when they found out, the age of that paper was 4th century. So definitely there was a gap of 600 years. And then the issue is, did we know about this manuscript before this, the current manuscript that we have? Nobody knows about it. So all these dates are going to be revised once we do more investigation. And I'm going to give you an example. You go to Oxford, you go to Cambridge, you go to Harvard, you go to Yale. Everywhere there is a big, huge history department where they are defining the history of their, country. in India, do we have similar system? The answer is no.
We import from
That's
here.
So
We don't.
we have not tried to define ourselves.
Mhm.
And because we have not tried to define ourselves, other people are defining us. And that's a problem. And we are perfectly contented right now when other people are defining us. And how honest they are? Well, you study the history of science in the former Soviet Union, in England, in China, by Nazis, they are not going to match at all. So that means that something is wrong with the system, with all these systems, not just one. And yet, we have not tried to define ourselves. And I think it should change.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. I think in the interest of time, we'll have to stop here. Thank you once again. I think yours talk was fascinating. Please follow us on YouTube, the Saraswati Sangam Project, and do like and subscribe us and support our activities.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure and to share my ideas. And if there is any question, feel free to contact me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm.